It's strange, isn't it? How easily the world can reach inside us. A single word, a look, a silence, and suddenly we're thrown off balance. It's like we hand out invisible keys to our emotions, trusting anyone to walk in and rearrange our peace. For the longest time, I didn't even notice I was doing it. I thought that's just how life worked, that other people's opinions, moods, or approval somehow defined who I was. But somewhere deep down, I always felt this quiet whisper, it doesn't have to be that way. I remember a time when a friend's cold tone could ruin my entire day, or when a small failure, missing a deadline, being misunderstood, would feel like proof that I was broken. It's exhausting to live like that, constantly measuring your worth by how gently the world treats you. But that's what most of us do. We let life, with all its unpredictability, decide whether we feel whole or not. And it's not because we're weak, it's because we were never taught another way. You know, the world trains us to react. From the moment we're children, we're rewarded for being agreeable and punished for showing too much emotion. We grow up thinking peace comes from controlling everything around us, from keeping people happy, from avoiding mistakes, from staying safe. But what if real peace comes from something much quieter, something already living inside us, untouched, waiting to be remembered? Sometimes I think about those rare people who seem unshakable. The ones who can be insulted, betrayed, disappointed, and still stand there, soft but unbroken. I used to envy them, thinking they were born that way. Now I know better. They weren't born invincible. They just stopped giving away their power. Somewhere along the line, they realized that the storm outside only matters if it finds a storm inside. It's not that they don't feel. They feel deeply. They just don't feed every emotion that comes knocking. They've learned to pause before reacting, to ask themselves, is this truly mine? Because most of what we suffer from isn't about what happens. It's about what gets activated within us when it happens. An old fear, a buried shame, a forgotten wound. The world presses a button, and before we even notice, an old version of us takes over. I've lived that pattern so many times. Someone ignores me and I'm suddenly a child again, desperate to be seen. Someone criticizes me and I crumble as if I'm back in that classroom, feeling not good enough. The present becomes a reflection of the past and I mistake old pain for new truth. It's such a quiet kind of prison, built not of walls but of habits. One day I decided to sit with that pain instead of escaping it. It was unbearable at first, like staring straight into a mirror that showed everything I didn't want to see. I realized I wasn't reacting to people. I was reacting to memories, to parts of me I had buried so long ago that they had turned into ghosts. And those ghosts had been steering my life all along. That's when something began to shift. I started to see that freedom wasn't about never getting hurt. It was about not confusing hurt with identity. It was about noticing that moment right before I react, when I still have a choice. The moment between the trigger and the explosion. There, in that small, almost invisible space, is where all transformation begins. You know that space too, don't you? It's the breath you take before saying something you'll regret. The stillness you feel right after your heart breaks, but before your mind starts spinning stories. It's small, but it's sacred. Because inside it, you're no longer a puppet of your emotions. You're aware. You're awake. And awareness changes everything. I won't pretend it's easy. The old ways pull at you like gravity. You'll want to defend yourself, explain, fix, control. But the truth is, the more you try to control the world, the less control you have over yourself. Peace isn't about taming everything outside you. It's about no longer being dragged by everything inside you. So I started asking myself different questions. Not, why did they do this to me? But what inside me is asking to be seen right now? Not, how can I stop this pain? But what is it trying to teach me? And slowly I realized that nothing, not rejection, not loss, not chaos, could touch the part of me that simply observes, the part that feels everything but doesn't drown in it. That's where the real power lives, in the ability to feel deeply and stay steady, to let the storm come and still breathe. The more I practiced this, the less the world had control over me. People could love me or leave me. Plans could fall apart. Life could twist and turn. And I would still be here. Not numb, but rooted. Maybe that's what Carl Jung meant when he said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." It's the quiet realization that you don't need to harden your heart to protect it. You just need to stop letting the outside world decide what it's worth. Because the truth is, no one can take your peace from you unless you hand it to them. And maybe right now, that's all you need to remember, that your calm is yours, your inner world is sacred, and when you stop giving it away, something incredible happens. The world loses its power to control you, and you finally begin to live from the inside out. It's strange how much of our suffering comes from things that aren't even happening right now. You might think you're reacting to someone's words or behavior, but often you're really reacting to what those things remind you of, moments you buried but never really let go of. I started to notice that in myself. Every time someone ignored me, it wasn't just about that moment. It was about every time I had felt invisible before. Every time someone criticized me, I felt the sting of all those years I spent trying to prove my worth. It's like carrying old ghosts into every new situation. We don't realize it, but so much of what we call our personality is really a defense system. We become who we needed to be to survive something long ago. Some of us learn to please, some to fight, some to withdraw. And then, as adults, we keep living from those same old wounds, still trying to earn love, still afraid of being left, still chasing validation as if we're starving. It's not that we're broken, it's that we've been trained by pain. One day, I caught myself getting angry at a small comment someone made. Something meaningless, really. But it burned. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and then I realized the comment wasn't the problem. What hurt was the story it awakened, that I wasn't enough, that I had to prove my value. The world had just brushed against an old bruise, and for the first time, instead of defending myself, I sat with it. I asked, "Why does this hurt so much?" And the answer wasn't about the person in front of me. It was about a version of me I had abandoned long ago. I think that's what Jung meant when he said, "What we don't make conscious appears in our lives as fate." The things we avoid inside ourselves eventually show up as people, circumstances, and conflicts, forcing us to face them anyway. We attract mirrors, not enemies. The partner who ignores us reflects our fear of being unseen. The boss who criticizes us echoes our inner judge. Even the friend who betrays us might just be life showing us where we still place our worth outside of ourselves. It's painful to see it that way, because it means we can't keep blaming others. It's so much easier to say, "They hurt me," than to admit, "They touched something I still haven't healed." But freedom always begins with honesty. The moment you stop running from your own reflection, something in you softens. You stop seeing the world as a battlefield and start seeing it as a classroom. Sometimes I wonder how many of our relationships are just reenactments of unfinished stories. How many times we choose the same kind of person, not because they're right for us, but because they feel familiar. We're drawn to situations that recreate old pain because deep down we want a different ending. But healing doesn't come from changing the other person. It comes from recognizing the pattern and saying, "Not this time." It's humbling, really, to realize that the people who hurt you most were often just playing a role in your awakening. That life keeps giving you mirrors until you finally see yourself clearly. At first, this truth feels cruel. But over time, it becomes liberating, because if the problem was never out there, then the solution was never out there either. It was always within. The moment you understand this, your entire world begins to shift. You stop reacting to every trigger. You stop taking everything so personally. When someone tries to provoke you, you pause and ask, what part of me is being touched right now? And sometimes that simple question dissolves the anger. It replaces defensiveness with curiosity. It makes you gentle, not weak, but deeply aware. There's a quiet power in saying, I see my shadow, but it doesn't control me anymore. That's what real strength feels like. Not the kind that dominates or wins arguments, but the kind that stays rooted when old wounds try to reopen. It's the strength of someone who has looked at their pain, acknowledged it, and chosen peace anyway. And you'll notice something beautiful when this happens. The same world that once seemed hostile starts to change its tone. The same people who used to trigger you lose their power, not because they've changed, but because you have. You've stopped living as a reaction to your past. Maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting what happened, but no longer needing it to define who you are. Not erasing the pain, but seeing it as part of your wholeness. The world will still press your buttons, but the buttons won't do what they used to. They'll light up for a moment, and then silence. No explosion, just awareness. That's when you realize the truth. You were never a puppet to begin with. The strings were made of old stories, and the moment you see them, they fall away. What's left is you. Not the wounded you, not the defensive you, but the one who's simply watching, breathing, free. I used to think pain was something to escape from, that the faster I could move past it, the quicker I'd return to being okay. But I've come to see that pain isn't the enemy. It's the mirror. It reflects the parts of me I've ignored, the emotions I've silenced, the fears I've buried under layers of pretending. And the more I tried to outrun it, the louder it became, until life itself began echoing back my unfinished business through people and situations that seemed designed to test me. Jung once said that everything that irritates us in others can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves. I didn't really grasp that until I started watching my own reactions. Every time someone's behavior made me angry or defensive, I realized they weren't actually creating those feelings. They were revealing them. It's unsettling when you first notice it, because suddenly all the power you've given to the world, to other people, to circumstances, comes flooding back to you. It means you can no longer hide behind blame. I remember one evening, I was sitting alone, still replaying a painful conversation from days before. I kept thinking about what I should have said, how unfair it was, how they made me feel small, and then it hit me. No one can make me feel small unless I still believe that I am. Their words had simply touched an old scar I hadn't healed. That realization hurt more than the argument itself, but it was also strangely freeing. Because in that moment, I saw that my pain wasn't punishment, it was information. We spend so much energy fighting the world, trying to control how others treat us, chasing validation, avoiding criticism. But the truth is, the world is neutral. It doesn't attack us, it reflects us. Every harsh word, every disappointment, every rejection, they're mirrors showing what still needs light. And once you see that, you start to understand that healing isn't about changing your reflection. It's about changing the one who looks into the mirror. Still, the ego resists this truth. It wants to be right. It wants to blame. It says, I'm hurt because they were cruel, or I'm broken because life was unfair. But the soul knows better. The soul whispers, you're hurting because something inside you is ready to be seen. That whisper is uncomfortable. It threatens the old identity that thrives on victimhood. But it's also the voice of awakening. When you start listening to that voice, you notice a shift. The people who once triggered you start losing their hold. Their behavior doesn't pierce you the same way. The chaos that used to overwhelm you begins to look like choreography, each event, each person, each emotion guiding you back to yourself. It's not that the pain disappears overnight, it's that you stop identifying with it. You become the observer of your own inner weather rather than the storm itself. I remember feeling almost betrayed by how simple it was. The moment I stopped fighting the world, it stopped feeling like an enemy. The same situations that once felt cruel began to look like lessons. The same rejection that once shattered me became a form of protection. Life hadn't changed, but I had. The hardest part, though, is surrendering the illusion of control. Because once you see that you're not reacting to the world, but to your inner wounds, you realize that control has always been a defense mechanism. We try to predict, plan, manage every outcome, not because we love order, but because we fear pain. We're terrified that if we let go, life will destroy us. But the irony is that holding on is what keeps us suffocating. I think true peace begins the moment you stop needing the world to validate your safety. When you stop trying to fix every reflection and instead start embracing what it shows you. Because then even pain becomes sacred. It's no longer punishment, but guidance. And you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to awaken in me? The day you stop fearing your own reflection is the day you start to become whole. The day you stop needing everything outside you to be perfect is the day you remember who you are. And who you are is not the story. It's not the wound. It's the one who sees it all and remains. There's a strange comfort in control. It makes you feel safe. Like if you plan every detail, predict every outcome, and stay one step ahead of disappointment, then maybe, just maybe, you won't have to feel pain again. I lived like that for years. I needed everything to make sense, to go according to plan. When people didn't behave the way I expected, I called it chaos. When life changed direction, I called it unfair. I didn't realize that what I called order was really just fear dressed up as discipline. Control felt powerful, but it was exhausting. I couldn't relax. Even moments of peace felt temporary, like waiting for something to go wrong. I thought I was protecting myself, but in truth, I was strangling the very life I wanted to feel. Every time I clung to control, I was telling the universe I didn't trust it, that I didn't trust myself. One day, I read something that changed everything. Suffering doesn't come from events themselves, but from our resistance to them. At first, I wanted to argue. I thought, no, people do cause pain. Life is unfair. But the more I looked, the more I saw that my pain wasn't born from what happened. It came from the way I believed things should have happened. It wasn't the breakup that hurt. It was my attachment to the story that it was supposed to last forever. It wasn't failure that broke me. It was the belief that I wasn't allowed to fail. It's humbling to realize how much of our pain is self-inflicted, not because we want to suffer, but because we keep fighting reality. Life is unpredictable. People will change their minds. Things will fall apart. But every time we say, this shouldn't be happening, we create tension against what is. We tighten around life instead of flowing with it. And in that tension, peace dies. I started experimenting with letting go, not the kind of letting go that feels like defeat, but the kind that feels like trust. I'd catch myself trying to control something, a conversation, a schedule, someone's opinion, and instead of forcing, I'd pause, I'd breathe, I'd remind myself, you don't need to manage everything to be safe. And often things unfolded better than I could have planned. Sometimes they didn't. But either way, I felt lighter. There's a subtle difference between being responsible and being controlling. Responsibility says, I'll do my best. Control says, it must happen my way. One is rooted in trust, the other in fear, And fear has 1,000 disguises. Perfectionism, overthinking, anxiety, people-pleasing. But beneath them all is the same desperate belief that if I can just keep everything together, maybe nothing will fall apart. The truth, though, is that sometimes things need to fall apart. That's how new life gets in. It's funny. When you finally stop trying to control people, they feel it. The energy shifts. Relationships become lighter, conversations easier, love more genuine. You stop pulling, and suddenly, what's meant for you stays without force. It's as if life has been waiting for you to unclench your fists. But letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start trusting. Trusting that whatever comes your way is meant to teach you something. Trusting that even chaos has its rhythm. Trusting that you can handle life, even when it doesn't go your way. Control screams, "I must know." Trust whispers, "I'll learn as I go." And yet, the hardest part isn't letting go of what's outside. It's letting go of who you think you need to be to stay safe. Because control isn't about others. It's about self-protection. Deep down, it's the scared part of you saying, if I can control everything, maybe I won't be hurt again. But that voice is lying. It's keeping you small. Because true strength doesn't come from holding on. It comes from the courage to release. I once asked myself, what if everything fell apart? What if the things I feared most actually happened? And you know what? I realized that even then, I'd still have myself, my breath, my presence, my awareness, and that realization was enough. Because once you know that you can survive what you fear, control starts to lose its power over you. The irony is, the moment you stop forcing life, it begins to cooperate with you. When you stop chasing, things start finding you. When you stop demanding certainty, clarity starts to appear. When you stop trying to make people love you, real love finally arrives. Control never gave me safety. It only gave me tension. Letting go gave me peace. Now, when something unexpected happens, plans fall apart, people change, life swerves, I try to smile, even if it's small, because I know it's not a punishment, it's an invitation. Life isn't asking me to tighten, it's asking me to trust. And maybe that's the quiet lesson we all have to learn. You don't find freedom by mastering control. You find it by mastering surrender. There's a space between what happens and how we react. Most of us never see it. It's so small, so subtle that we live our whole lives skipping over it. Something triggers us, a tone of voice, a glance, a delay, and before we even know what's happening, we're already reacting, defending, attacking, retreating. The body moves before the mind catches up. And later, when things calm down, we tell ourselves, I didn't mean to say that, or I don't know what came over me. But it wasn't a mystery, it was conditioning. The brain has its patterns, its shortcuts. It doesn't care about peace. It cares about survival. Somewhere deep inside, a part of us is always scanning for danger. When someone rejects us or criticizes us, the brain reacts as if it's a life or death threat. The amygdala fires, adrenaline floods, and suddenly you're 10 years old again, desperate to be safe. The irony is that most of the dangers we face today aren't physical at all, they're emotional. Yet our bodies don't know the difference. They still go to war. I used to think I could outsmart this by simply being calm. But awareness isn't about suppression. It's about noticing. It's about catching that split second between the stimulus and the response, between what happens and what we do with it. That's where freedom begins. The more I practiced seeing it, the more I realized it was always there, waiting for me. At first, it's just a flicker. You feel the rise of emotion, the tightening in your chest, the heat in your stomach, the rush of words forming behind your teeth. And right there, in that second, you have a choice. You can let the old pattern take over, or you can pause, breathe, observe. It sounds simple, but it's revolutionary, because the moment you pause, the past loses its grip. Neuroscience calls this repatterning. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, you weaken an old neural pathway and create a new one. The brain rewires itself around your presence. Slowly, you stop living on autopilot. You stop being pulled by every emotional wave. You become the ocean instead. It's not that the feelings disappear. They still come, but they no longer drag you under. Anger becomes a message, not a weapon. Sadness becomes a teacher, not a trap. Anxiety becomes a signal that something inside you needs care. You start to see emotions not as enemies, but as visitors. You greet them, listen, and let them leave. I practiced this one small step at a time. The next time someone interrupted me, I noticed the spark of irritation rising, and I didn't act on it. The next time I felt ignored, I noticed the ache, and I didn't chase reassurance. The next time I was tempted to argue just to be right, I breathed, and I stayed quiet. Sometimes I failed. Sometimes the reaction came anyway, but even then I noticed it afterward, and that noticing mattered, because awareness is the seed of change. Over time, I began to understand what Viktor Frankl meant when he said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." It's that space that turns pain into wisdom. It's that space that separates reaction from presence, habit from consciousness. And you start to see that everything in life is offering you that choice. Every conflict, every disappointment, every misunderstanding is another invitation to return to that space. It's not about being passive or indifferent. It's about being awake, because awareness doesn't make you cold. It makes you steady. It lets you act with clarity instead of chaos. People around you feel it too. They sense that something in you has changed, that you're not as easy to provoke anymore, that your peace isn't up for negotiation. They may not understand it, but they feel it. The same energy that once reacted now radiates presence. And presence changes everything. You begin to notice that some situations no longer affect you the way they used to. Words that once pierced now pass through like wind. Criticism that used to crush you becomes feedback you can observe without losing your center. You realize that peace isn't the absence of triggers. It's the mastery of response. And it's in that mastery, not through control, but through awareness, that you find true strength. Not the strength that needs to win, but the strength that can stay still. Not the strength that conquers others, but the one that conquers chaos within. That's when you realize life will always happen. People will say things, plans will fall apart. But if you can stay aware in that small, sacred space between what happens and how you respond, you are free. There comes a point when looking within yourself stops being a nice idea and starts feeling like survival. It's no longer about self-improvement or philosophy. It's raw, it's real. It's like the walls you built to protect yourself begin to crumble, and everything you've avoided for years starts knocking loudly. The anger you've suppressed, the fear you've ignored, the sadness you've covered with busyness, they all show up at once asking to be seen. And for the first time, you can't distract yourself anymore. I remember when that happened to me. It wasn't one big event, just a slow unraveling, a kind of quiet fatigue that settled into my bones. I was tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from pretending for too long. Pretending I was fine, pretending I was in control, pretending I didn't care when, deep down, I did. I was holding on to an image of myself that didn't even feel like me anymore, and keeping that image alive required a constant fight. That's when I learned something important. Pretending is a heavy form of suffering. It keeps you at war with your own truth. And the moment you stop pretending, even if it's painful, you can finally breathe again. Because honesty, no matter how uncomfortable, is lighter than denial. But looking inward isn't glamorous. It's not all peace and light. Sometimes it feels like tearing down a house while still living in it. You find parts of yourself you don't want to see, the bitterness, the jealousy, the fear of being forgotten. At first, you judge them, you want to fix them. But slowly, you realize that healing doesn't mean erasing what you find. It means allowing it to exist without shame. Integration begins when you stop dividing yourself into good and bad. It's when you can say, yes, I have anger, yes, I have fear, yes, I've made mistakes, and yet I am still worthy. It's such a simple sentence, but it changes everything. Because until you accept the parts of yourself you once rejected, you'll keep searching for wholeness in other people's approval. This process, the one Jung called individuation, feels like remembering who you were before you learned to hide, before you learned that being loved meant being perfect, or that showing emotion meant being weak. You begin to realize that every mask you've ever worn was just an adaptation to survive. And as you take those masks off, one by one, you discover a softness underneath that isn't weakness, it's authenticity. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you finally allow yourself to feel what you actually feel. You don't have to fake positivity. You don't have to hold yourself together all the time. You can be honest, vulnerable, human, and still whole. Because wholeness isn't about being flawless. It's about including everything. When you stop running from your pain, it stops chasing you. When you look it in the eye, it starts to dissolve. Not because it vanishes, but because you stop identifying with it. You start to understand that you are not your anger, not your insecurity, not your fear. You are the one who sees them, and the one who sees is never broken. At first, this realization feels almost too simple to be true. How could just watching change anything? But it does. Awareness is alchemy. It transforms pain into understanding, shame into acceptance, chaos into clarity. You start to live with more compassion for yourself and for others too, because once you've met your own darkness, it's hard to judge anyone else's. There's something profoundly beautiful about being able to say, yes, I have wounds, but they don't define me. You stop needing to prove your strength through control or distance. Your strength becomes quiet, steady, kind. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that simply is. And maybe that's what real healing looks like. Not a constant high, not a perfect calm, but a gentle honesty with yourself. You stop striving to be better and start learning to be real. The world doesn't need a stronger version of you. It needs the real one. The one who can feel deeply without drowning. The one who can face their pain and still choose love. The one who can say, this is me, flawed, learning, whole. That's where the journey turns from self-discovery into peace. Not the peace that depends on circumstances, but the kind that lives quietly inside you. The kind that no one and nothing can take away. At some point something shifts. It's quiet, almost unnoticeable at first. Like the sound of snow falling in the night. You realize that what used to throw you into chaos no longer does. The things that once made you anxious, defensive, or desperate for control begin to lose their grip. It's not that life has become easier, it's that you've become more grounded. You've stopped fighting everything. You've started trusting yourself. There's a lightness that comes with this. A kind of calm strength. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. You don't need everyone to understand you, like you, agree with you. You can stand in a room full of noise and still feel centered, because now your peace doesn't depend on what's happening. It depends on how present you are within it. I remember when I first felt it. It wasn't dramatic. I was driving home, and someone cut me off in traffic. Normally, that would have sent me into a storm of irritation, but that day I just breathed. I saw the impulse rise and fade, like a wave that no longer needed to crash. It wasn't indifference, it was awareness. That tiny moment felt like a victory, not over them, but over myself. It's strange how much energy we free up when we stop reacting. The world becomes less of a battlefield and more of a dance. Things still go wrong, people still disappoint you, plans still fall apart, but you're no longer shattered by it. You flow, you adapt. You accept that peace isn't a place you reach when life stops challenging you. It's the way you walk through the challenge. People notice this change in you. They might not say it outright, but they feel it. You're not pulled into gossip or conflict anymore. You don't chase validation. You don't explain your boundaries. You embody them. Some will find your calm unsettling because they can no longer manipulate it. Others will be drawn to it because it gives them permission to slow down, too. You've become the still point in a spinning world. But make no mistake, this isn't numbness. It's not about becoming cold or detached. It's the opposite. You feel more. You just don't drown in what you feel. You can hold sadness without collapsing, face anger without exploding, experience uncertainty without losing yourself. That's the kind of power no one can give you, and no one can take away. There's a line I once wrote in my journal. Freedom is not about having everything under control. It's about no longer being controlled by anything. I come back to it often, because that's what this journey has been. Learning that strength isn't about domination, it's about presence. The power to stay soft in a hard world. To stay open when everything in you wants to close. And something magical happens when you live like that. Life starts cooperating with you. You're not pushing against it anymore, so things begin to align naturally. Opportunities appear where before there were obstacles. Relationships deepen or fade with grace. Even pain feels different. It becomes meaningful instead of punishing. You begin to see that everything, every heartbreak, every disappointment, every mistake was guiding you to this awareness. The universe wasn't trying to break you. It was trying to wake you. Every trigger was an invitation to return to yourself. Every loss was a lesson in letting go. Every moment of confusion was a call to trust. That's when you finally understand what freedom really means. It's not the absence of problems, it's the presence of peace in the middle of them. It's knowing that even when the ground shifts beneath you, you won't fall apart, because you've built your home inside yourself. And the world feels different from here, softer, slower, more honest. You stop chasing moments and start inhabiting them. You stop trying to be impressive and start being real. You don't need to control because you've learned to allow. You don't need to defend because you've learned to understand. You don't need to run because you've learned to stay. It's such a subtle shift, but it changes everything. You begin to see that you never had to become invincible. You just had to remember your wholeness. You don't need to stop feeling. You just need to stop fearing what you feel. Because the truth is, the moment you stop running from life, it stops running from you. And in that stillness, you realize something beautiful. You are finally free, not because the world became peaceful, but because you did. There's something deeply humbling about reaching the point where everything you've learned stops being theory and starts becoming life. It's no longer about reading words that inspire you. It's about embodying them when things fall apart. That's when you see what presence really means. When your heart is breaking, when plans fail, when fear whispers that you've lost your way, and yet you stay, you breathe, you choose awareness over reaction. That's when the truth sinks in. No one and nothing can control you anymore unless you hand them that power. I used to think enlightenment would feel like bliss, like constant peace, but it doesn't. It feels more like honesty. It's quieter than I imagined. It's not fireworks. It's a soft exhale. You still feel everything, pain, disappointment, longing, but they no longer own you. You let them move through you like weather. You stop clinging to what's pleasant or resisting what's hard. You stop bargaining with reality. You just meet each moment as it is, without needing it to be different. That's the paradox of freedom. It doesn't come from controlling your emotions, but from no longer needing to. The storms still come, but you know they'll pass. You no longer mistake them for who you are. You are the sky that holds them, vast and unshaken. Sometimes people ask me, but how do I keep this peace when life gets hard? And I tell them, you don't keep it, you return to it. Again and again. Every time you pause before reacting. Every time you breathe instead of defend. Every time you forgive yourself for forgetting and choose to begin again. That's the real practice. That's what mastery looks like. Not perfection, but presence. It's easy to stay calm in silence, in meditation, in solitude. The test is in traffic, in conflict, in heartbreak. The test is when your ego flares up and you want to prove a point, but something deeper in you whispers, don't, and you listen. Not out of weakness, but because peace has become more precious to you than being right. That's the quiet victory no one sees, but you feel it. This is what individuation really means, becoming whole, not perfect. It's realizing that the you spent years trying to fix was never broken, just disconnected. You'd built your identity around your wounds, your fears, your patterns, and mistook them for your truth. But once you see that, it's like waking up from a long dream. You begin to live from your center instead of your conditioning. You stop chasing what was never missing. You stop searching for validation in people who can't even see themselves. You stop fighting for control over things that were never yours to control. Instead, you turn inward, not to escape, but to anchor. You realize that your inner world is the only one you ever truly live in, and that everything external is just a reflection of it. And you begin to trust life again. Even the messy parts, especially the messy parts. You start seeing beauty in the unpredictability, in the imperfections. You notice how loss creates space for growth, how endings lead to beginnings, how every fall teaches you to rise more gently. You realize that the universe was never against you. It was always teaching you how to come home. So now, when pain visits, I don't fight it. I welcome it like an old teacher. I ask, what do you need me to see this time? And every time, it shows me something new, some fragment of myself I had yet to love. The work never really ends, but it becomes lighter, softer, almost sacred. You stop living as if life owes you comfort and start living as if every experience is an invitation to awaken. That's when gratitude takes root, not as a forced mindset, but as a natural response to being alive. Even when things hurt, you know they're shaping you. Even when you lose, you feel guided. Even when it's dark, you sense something deeper holding you. And maybe that's what true liberation is. Not immunity from pain, but intimacy with it. Not indifference to life, but full participation without fear. You realize that peace isn't a destination, it's a way of meeting the moment. When you finally live like this, you stop trying to become someone else. You stop waiting for the right conditions to feel free. Because freedom was never something to earn. It was something to remember. And now, you remember.